not really known for doing reaction videos, although I have done a couple of them over the years, and today we're going to do one more. This particular news article was sent to me by many different people asking me what I thought about it, so I figured I would just go ahead and do this here. But before we get started, I want you to do something for me. I'm going to put a link to this article in the description down below. I want you to click on that article and give them a hit. Maybe just leave it up for a while, read it yourself, whatever you want to do, but give them a click, because rather than, I don't want anybody basically to watch my video, read it in my video, and then not actually read the article and not give Phone Arena a click and this author a click for the work that they did do. I don't want my reaction to take away from the original creator. But this headline is, the Surface Duo 3, is Microsoft's lineup broken by design? Now, I've not read this article. You're going to see me read it live here and react to kind of tell you guys what I think about it. So the author starts off here with, I think that at this point we can all agree that smartphones have become somewhat boring, at least visually. Sure, every year the specs go up, the camera becomes better, and the design stays almost the same. I agree 1,000,000% with that sentiment. It's something I've echoed on this channel repeatedly. These old slab phones, no matter how good they are, which some of them are very, very, very good, I find them to be quite boring. If your phone doesn't fold, I'm not probably all that interested. I want to see something unique. I want to see a keyboard, a folding phone, a sliding phone, a twisting phone, something different. Totally agree with this. Another interesting twist on the notion of what constitutes a smartphone is the one put forward by the Surface Duo lineup. I've never gotten the chance to discuss the latter before, but a new release by Lenovo made me revisit Microsoft's peculiar device. It is a very peculiar device. To my disappointment, the company seems to have given up on the Surface Duo in its current form. And should we ever see another product in the series, which it is becoming more and more questionable if that's ever going to happen, it will likely be ditching the double screen form for a mundane, in comparison, flexible display. I'm totally in agreement with this author so far. In the following paragraphs, I'll put forward my case as to why Surface Duo should not become your average notepad-style foldable, and why the lineup has much unexplored potential that Microsoft should not give up on. I'm beginning to understand why so many people are sending this to me, because we seem to be in lockstep. So at this point, they basically say the Surface Duo was a very flawed device. Even though it had a lot of cool, good things going for it, it had a lot of problems, and being different is not enough to be successful, and it was a flop. Now, there are areas we could explore there as to why that was the case. Obviously, the device, you could look at it two different perspectives. Why was it a flop? Well, one, because it wasn't marketed, it had too many bugs, and yeah, those are probably the two big ones. But you could also take a step back and say, why were those things true? Well, and the answers to that is because there was no budget to market it, and there was a very small team working on it. So you can keep kicking that can down the road, and your stopping point for why depends on where you choose to stop. So moving on and talking about Duo as a concept, Duo 1, he says that it aspired to be a viable smartphone despite being a very different beast. And there's definitely something to be said there as well. For those that know the history of Duo, you know that Duo was not actually initially intended as a phone. It was intended as a dual screen Windows device. And when that Windows operating system, Andromeda OS, was canceled, it was the device without an operating system. You slap Android on it, but the moment you slap Android on it and you're the size roundabout of a phone, you become, for all intents and purposes, a phone, even though your hardware was not initially designed to be that of a phone. And they kind of touch this here. The problem is that Microsoft's solution to the problem was to attempt to make the successor a better phone. So Duo 1 didn't have phone things. It didn't have NFC. It didn't have a proper camera. It didn't have 5G. Well, Duo 2, they try to address the deficiencies in the phone concept by giving it these things. And they say this resulted in a whole set of new problems, including the camera bump that made using the device when folding in reverse somewhat uncomfortable. I personally don't necessarily agree that this was like a negative thing, that Duo 1 to Duo 2 was a downgrade. I actually think Duo 2 is a far better device, and it is a far easier device for me to carry as my only device, because the camera in particular with a Gcam port is more than capable of taking, nice photos, and it can easily be my only device in my pocket. The price tag is still a big problem though. And I think this is pretty much where we're headed with this article. Should the Surface Duo be a smartphone in the first place? And they just come right out and say it. They don't think Duo should be a smartphone. And of course, this is going to be an opinion, and we can go back and forth on this. Again, let's see what their argument is. Through attempting to make this device fill the shoes of a conventional daily driver, you're not only negating the novelty of the form factor, but also producing a subpar handset in the process. I don't know exactly how they're negating the novelty of the form factor, because I still find the form factor quite novel. I mean, how does giving you the ability to text and make phone calls from it do anything negative to the form factor? I'm not quite sure what they could possibly mean there. Is it a subpar handset? Well, in some ways, you could absolutely make that argument, okay? Like the act of taking phone calls on it, well, it's not as quick of a process. You have to open it up and then perhaps fold it all the way around. And then, it's a really, really big device to have next to your head. It also is subpar in the regard to taking quick photos, right? If you need to one hand your phone to pull it out, you can't just pull it out and quickly double click the power button, line up a photo and take it. I know you can take photos with the thing closed, but that's not useful in my opinion. You actually have to have both hands, open it up, and kind of get things framed. So there are ways that it is a subpar handset. I do also want to take a moment and sort of ask, and maybe this gets explained later in the video, but I kind of want to ask, if it's not a smartphone, what is it, right? And I think that with the original Duo concept, what Microsoft was attempting to do before making it into a phone was something that was very, very, let's call it brave, right? They were trying to literally create a new market segment, a new sort of product that hadn't really been seen before, right? Because we have phones that are increasingly larger and larger. We have laptops, we have tablets, but this was going to be some sort of strange dual-screened in-betweener. Not quite a tablet, right? Because it's kind of too small to be a tablet. And then not quite a phone because it's two screened and a little big and weird to be a phone. So they had that choice to make. Do we want to have this thing be its own unique thing that might require people, well, it would inherently require people to carry two devices? You've got your big smartphone in one pocket and your Duo in another pocket, or do we actually just try to make this thing be the only device you need to carry? It's a really tough call to make because on paper, Duo's not going to be convincing to most people at either one of those jobs. I think they picked the one that had the best chance of actually accomplishing. He does move on to another point that I've made on this channel as well. This is why I think Duo 3 with a foldable screen will be nothing more than a cheap carbon copy of the Galaxy Z Fold 4. And while he does think that we need a meaningful alternative, Microsoft is probably not going to be the one that's able to provide it. Now, I do want to say that Duo 3 with a folding OLED screen, should it ever see the light of day, is going to have software that will differentiate it from the Z Folds of the world. It's going to do things in some inherently different ways, and it's also going to look very different from that. It's going to look very different from Duo 1 and Duo 2. So there will be some software things there if it ever does make it to the market, which, again, we've reported on this channel that, the Duo team has been sort of deprioritized and pulled onto some other tasks. Will they be allowed to return to Duo and continue this project? And maybe we'll see Duo 3 next year or something like that. That does remain to be seen. So they do also mention that going to a foldable OLED screen might actually make the device more expensive than it already is. And obviously, I don't know for sure what they're pricing for Duo 3, what they're targeting. But I do want to say one thing about that. Duo and Duo 2 both use screens that are of a size that no one else is using. So the screens are already by far the most expensive component of Duo and Duo 2 because they are custom cut screens. Every other phone, the vast majority of them, they pick screen sizes that are panels that are already being mass produced and are therefore way, 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 way cheaper. So yes, might a folding OLED screen be more expensive? Perhaps, but it's not going to be like wildly more expensive than what they're already doing. The margins on Duo and Duo 2 are already very, very thin. So then he starts talking about Surface Neo, basically explaining that Neo was this larger version of Duo running Windows 10X. Of course, I just posted a video on this channel giving you sort of a tour of Windows 10X and what Surface Neo would have been like to daily drive. As they say here, it's almost sad to think Duo saw the light of day, but Neo did not. Of course, Neo was in really, really rough shape and was nowhere near releasable, whereas Duo, as buggy as it was much, much closer to being a releasable product. And I think now we're kind of getting to the heart of this. They say they believe Duo will be a much more successful tertiary device rather than a conventional smartphone. They go on, in my view, the winning formula for Duo 3 would be for Microsoft to reimagine the lineup as a somewhat smaller Surface Neo. What they'd rather see instead are two different screens, each approximately the size of an iPad Mini 6 slapped together in a one-of-a-kind foldable tablet, which is not marketed as something that could replace your daily driver. I don't know how big that screen is. Let's look that up real quick. So we're talking each screen being 8.3 inches. So to put that in perspective, what they're basically arguing for is if you take Duo 2's, both screens, combine them into one, that is an 8.3 inch screen. So turn your Duo sideways and imagine this is one screen and then open up another one. You may be wondering, well, what about Surface Neo? Well, Neo had 9-inch screens. So they're basically saying that Duo 3 should be a slightly smaller Surface Neo, and that it should be backed by a smooth operating system, preferably Windows-based, and that could potentially save the lineup. So to me, this just sounds like advocating that Surface Duo should become Surface Neo. And you could say, well, yeah, but it's going to be 0.7 of an inch smaller on each screen, but that's not a significant difference. At least to me, that's not a significant enough difference to differentiate it from Surface Neo. You may as well just call it Surface Neo. And it's definitely not going to be pocketable at that point. So you're going to have to put it in a bag anyways. And then some people at that point are going to say, well, if it's going to have to go in a bag, I can't put it in a pocket, I might as well have something with an even bigger screen. I might as well go with that yoga book that Lenovo is working on. It also, at that point, 100% has to be a secondary device. It can't be your only device because it's not going to go in your pocket, answering phone calls, text messaging. You couldn't possibly do any of that stuff. And that is a place where I don't know how successful they can be, because you're asking people who have probably already spent $500, $600, maybe $1,000 on a smartphone already to then invest in another device that they're going to have to carry. And I think that's why this author is basically advocating for it becoming Surface Neo, because they don't think it can succeed as a phone. So if it's not a phone, you remove the phone aspect of it, but it's still this size, that doesn't really make sense to carry this and another phone. So how do you make that make sense? Well, you make it bigger. That way it does offer a different enough experience to justify its existence, to justify potentially bringing it with you. And honestly, I totally understand where they're coming from, because the idea of Surface Duo 3 being like a wildly successful phone just does feel fairly unrealistic at this point. But to me, the idea of, growing the thing into a Surface Neo and that being a successful device, given what we've just seen with Duo, the idea of convincing people to spend, let's be honest, guys, it would probably be, again, at least, $1,000 to $1,400. Neo was going to be over $2,000. Let's just be real. It was going to be over $2,000 with that keyboard and all these things that would be necessary. Unless this thing is somehow also the cheapest Surface device they've ever released in terms of a premium flagship Surface device, I don't see this thing being any more likely to be successful than Duo already is, because there just aren't that many people that are going to buy a secondary device to their phone. And if they're going to do that, they're probably just going to carry an iPad or a tablet or a laptop. Of the two, Neo and Duo, Duo was the one I was always interested in. Neo looked really, really cool, but I love the idea of this being in my pocket all the time, easy to pull out and use. It's still why I go back to this thing. The unfortunate reality is there just aren't that many of us that feel this way, and scaling it up, I just don't think is going to change things very much. To me, the solution to this problem was to go with the Duo 3 that they were originally working on, which was like Duo 2, with improved specs, with improved screens, with smaller bezels, really focus on the software, release that device, and actually market the thing. Have an ad campaign, triple the size of the Duo team, throw some money, some actual money at the problem, instead of doing this weird thing that Microsoft has done, where they've trickled money along for 27 years on Duo. How about we just put a lump sum towards it all at once here and actually try to put a thrust forward and truly push the thing? That would have been if you want the thing to succeed, you really had two options at this point. You're going to cut your losses and say, we've wasted too much time and energy on this project as it is, or you're going to make one true, like real, actual push to get this thing to break into the market and to break this concept into the market. Unfortunately, it seems as though they're continuing to just sort of trickle things along, which won't be a success no matter which way they go. I do think this is a very interesting idea. I love seeing Duo and Neo getting talked about in the tech world still to this point. So shout out to this author and to Phone Arena. It's a really well-written article, and I agree with a lot of it, and I totally understand where this author is coming from. I'm not trying to put down or to find negatives in their concept. This is what they're after, and everybody has their own opinions and their own proclivities in terms of what they're looking for in a device. Personally, I want a device that is a phone, and I think Duo 2 is a good enough phone for me, but I also understand that for most people, it's probably not going to be the case, and I get why this person would want it to basically be Surface Neo instead. It's going to come down to what your preference actually was. At any rate, guys, thanks for watching. Everybody that sent this article to me, thanks for that as well. Like I said earlier, click on the link in the description. Go give this article a click. Send some revenue towards Phone Arena for the work done there. I will see you on the next one. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.